Hi, I'm Lisa Prather, and welcome to The Voice of Health with our host, Dr. Robert Prather of the Prather Practice, where lives are changed every day through the natural approach to healthcare. We're talking today about diabetes, a growing crisis.
Yes.
And I know it is growing. Let's talk about that. How many people are diagnosed with diabetes in the United States?
Well, right now the number that are diagnosed with diabetes is about 23 million.
Now, is that including type 1 and type 2?
Type 1 and type 2.
So 23 million Americans.
Yeah. And about less than about 5% are type 1. Majority is type 2.
Oh, so less than 5% are type 1.
Right.
Okay. We're going to talk today about type 1 and type 2. Correct. What is the most common type? I think you just said it.
Type 2.
I was listening. Let's define and talk about type 1, and then we're going to spend the majority, I want our listeners know, talking about type 2 diabetes.
All right.
Correct, because that's what's really on
most people's minds, yes.
Yeah, and growing.
It's a very growing crisis. Type 1 diabetes is where your body is no longer able to make the insulin. So what has occurred is that there's been an autoimmune reaction, and the body's own immune system has destroyed the ability of your body to make insulin. So you're insulin dependent. Oftentimes it can be kicked off by medication, by infections, allergies, those types of things. There has been several different factors that go along with that. The most common infection that kicks it off is a Coxsackievirus.
I've heard you talk about that.
Right. The Coxsackievirus gets into the pancreas itself. The body attacks islets of Langerhans, destroys them, and then you develop type 1 diabetes. It used to be called juvenile diabetes,
right? But
it's not anymore because you can develop it at any time in your life. It was just more common. In other words, type 2 diabetes didn't used to ever occur in children, though it is starting to occur
in children. Okay, because I always thought type 1, is it genetic in any way?
There is a genetic factor, but there's a lot more involved in it. It is an autoimmune reaction where the body has attacked its own cells.
So is it considered an autoimmune disease?
It is. It was kicked off by an autoimmune disease,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, but can you get type 1 later on as an adult?
You can.
Okay.
You can. The body can have the ability to go after that. It's more common to get it as a child, but it can occur at any time. Okay.
So let's talk now, unless there's anything more you want to talk on type 1, we'll talk about that because we do treat that at the Prather Practice. But let's talk about type 2 diabetes. What is that?
Sure. Well, type 2 diabetes is where your body isn't able to process. In other words, you have the insulin, but it's more of what we would consider an insulin resistant. So, there are several different factors that go into taking the glucose into the body, and the insulin is the transport. So you can have where it's not transporting well, or it can't pass it across the cell wall. So there's a failure that occurs on how the body handles the insulin, how it handles the glucose, getting it into the system. And there can be quite a few different factors that go into that. But type 2 diabetes is very treatable.
Yeah, can it be reversed?
It can be reversed. Matter of fact, if you do the things that you should be doing, you can always reverse type 2 diabetes. So, it is something that can be worked with, can be controlled. One of the when we're talking about a growing problem, that's a little pun, because one of the things that's occurring is that we have a very fast growing weight problem within the United States, where people have become obese at a very rapid rate. So that's a huge factor, no pun intended, in the increase
huge factor.
in the increase of type 2 diabetes, because obesity can really lead to a diabetic situation.
So is that kind of, as obesity is increased, so
Correct.
has type 2 diabetes?
Right. If you go back into the 1970s when they started to keep track of obesity.
I wasn't born yet. Oh, just kidding. Is that when they started keeping track?
And that's when they were starting to keep track. There was, very few of the states had a 10% obesity rate. Mm-hmm. There was only one state that had a 20%. Now it's a situation where there's hardly any. There isn't any state that's below 10% on their obesity rate, and many of the states are hitting 40% on their obesity rate. So
40%.
40%.
Wow.
So it's a very fast-growing problem. Mm-hmm. And then obesity is also hitting children even now. So they are starting to develop type 2 diabetes, which in the 70s was unheard of. No child had, it was very rare for a child to have type 2 diabetes. Now it's becoming much more common. Mm-hmm. So, there is just a real health crisis. Weight control is one of the major factors on that. And as we can control the weight, we can also help to control the type 2 diabetes. But there needs to be dietary changes. There needs to be usually some supplementation that goes along with that. But type 2 diabetes can be controlled if people will follow the things that they should do.
Well, and even, when people say I'm pre-diabetic, what does that mean?
Yeah. When we were talking about, how many people are diagnosed with diabetes, there's 23.1 million. But there's 30.3 million people who actually have diabetes, which is 9.4% of the U.S. population. So undiagnosed, there's 7.2 million people who are walking around who have type 2 diabetes that is undiagnosed. Now, even more critical along those lines is pre-diabetes. Those are the people who are on the verge of getting type 2 diabetes. And it's 84.1 million adults are pre-diabetic, and which is 34% of the U.S. population.
Oh, my goodness.
So people are walking. As a matter of fact, when we have people come in and I do blood tests on them, I have told quite a few people that they are pre-diabetic. And if they don't get, things straightened out, and oftentimes I'll get a look of, oh no, in their eyes, because they'll usually say, oh, my mom or my dad is diabetic, and I don't want to go through that. So what do I do to fix that so I'm no longer diabetic? And so we put together a whole program for them to prevent that. So, people need to be going in, more people, we all should be getting annual checks, get some blood tests, thorough blood tests, because a lot of people are being missed on their diabetes. And then also you should be screened for pre-diabetes. And if that's starting to occur, then that needs to be treated. It's much easier to treat it before it becomes full-blown diabetic. But so, getting that checked, find out if you're pre-diabetic, especially if you have a family history of that, especially if you have some obesity, check that out and see. And every person should be screened in the United States to make sure that they aren't diabetic or pre-diabetic.
Well, you've been practicing for 30 years.
Sure.
Have you seen an increase with your patient population of diabetes?
Yes, absolutely. The rate of diabetes follows along with the whole rate of obesity. We didn't see anywhere near the numbers of people who are diabetic back in the 70s or 80s when I first was starting in on all this with
and I
diabetes.
Wasn't born yet.
So it's something that it's a growing problem. Matter of fact, the U.S. Census Bureau estimates, because of type 2 diabetes and the obesity crisis, that the next generation will not live as long as the generation before. So it's the first time in American history that has occurred. In American history, that the next generation didn't live longer than the generation before. So, we need to do something about it.
That's a crisis.
Right. And then, what is the reason behind it? We aren't really taking in more calories, but what we are doing is taking in a lot more chemicals within our diet. Our diet has been changed quite a bit. We don't have people who make meals from scratch anymore. Everything's prepackaged, and when you put together all those prepackages, there has to be a lot of preservatives. They use a lot of sugar. They use a lot of the different types of things that don't really lend to a healthy body. It puts on weight.
The body says that's a foreign invader. I'm going to that fat cell.
Correct. So our diet has really created this. If they were looking at comparing American diet to the French diet, and of course the French are starting to change and go more into convenience food also. And when you look at the two, the French were taking in more calories than Americans, but they were at healthy weight, whereas the Americans were obese. Now that they're starting to introduce the chemicals and the preservatives and the sugars into the diet, the French are starting to get fat too.
Balloon out.
Right. So there is a very direct correlation to the quality of the food that we're eating and this crisis that's occurring.
Yeah. When we come back, more on diabetes, a growing crisis. You can win a free 60-minute massage in a relaxing spa at the Prather practice. Each month, we have a drawing to give away a free massage to one of our lucky Facebook and Twitter fans. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter on our website at thevoiceofhealthradio.com. This is The Voice of Health with Dr. Robert Prather. The Voice of Health Wellness Tip with Dr. Robert Prather of the Prather practice. Dr. Prather, what can a new patient expect when they come into your office?
The first thing is that's extremely important is the consultation. That's really where everything begins.
And that consultation is complimentary free. They can come in, and the consultation's with you, which is nice. Yeah, the consultation is absolutely critical. Matter of fact, you can get 90% of your diagnosis just from the consultation. Listening to the patient.
Finding out what their concerns are, what needs to be done, how we can best help them. Having a good understanding of the complaints of the patient is absolutely critical for good care, and the patient knowing that we are actually listening to them. We have very thorough intake forms that are extremely helpful. Gives us quite a bit of information of what's going on into the system. After the consultation, you have to look at the diagnostics.
Okay.
You first have to understand, where the patient's coming from, have an idea, but then you have to know, what to do, what the problem is. There is a difference on our diagnostics than from the medical diagnostics. The medical profession, as a disease care-based program, they are looking at disease states and combinations along those lines to treat the symptoms. Our basis of our care is a understanding of what is the underlying cause, finding out what that is, usually caused by a break from homeostasis. And you're going to hear that word if you're listening to our radio program.
You're going to know
every
it well.
Time. Because homeostasis is the basis of our practice, and homeostasis is the basis of health, and we are a health office. That is what a structure function office is. So the diagnostics are extremely thorough, probably more thorough than what you would get anywhere else. We look at very extensive blood work. We might do hair analysis, might do some evaluation of the gut, because that's so important to one's health. We do a thorough cardiac evaluation. We do a thorough musculoskeletal exam. Many offices that even are into natural health are either just dealing with the functional aspect or they are just dealing with the structural aspect. We are unique in that we deal with both, and both of them extremely thoroughly and extremely well.
Schedule your appointment at the Prather practice, 317-848-8048. That's 317-848-8048. Or learn more on our website at thevoiceofhealthradio.com. The Prather practice, restoring hope. We want to invite our radio listeners to join us for a very special screening of an award-winning film called Just One Drop. This special movie event will be held on Wednesday, November 7th at 7:30 p.m. at the Regal Village Park Cinema in Carmel. Homeopathy is a specific form of medicine that uses minute doses of highly diluted substance that stimulates the body to cure itself. To many, homeopathy seems implausible. They fear it is a placebo effect, or worse, a form of deception or quackery. Yet, homeopathy has been around for over 200 years and is used by millions worldwide. The film, Just One Drop, explores the controversy, dispels the misconceptions and the myths, and asks whether or not homeopathy has been given a fair shake. The Just One Drop special movie event, Wednesday, November 7th at 7:30 p.m. at the Regal Village Park Cinema in Carmel. Learn more about the film and buy your tickets now at thevoiceofhealthradio.com.
I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. I feel good. I knew that I wouldn't. So good.
You're
So
listening
good.
to The Voice of Health with Dr. Robert Prather of the Prather Practice, the most comprehensive wellness center in the Midwest.
Sugar and spice.
We're talking today about diabetes, a growing crisis. And Dr. Prather, we're talking about type 1 and type 2, but we're talking, most of the show, we're going to be talking about type 2 diabetes, which is on a rise, unbelievable rise. That's why we're calling this a growing crisis. We talked about type 2 diabetes can be reversed. People, if they're willing, to work at it.
Yes.
Can be reversed. And we're going to talk about our structure-function approach to diabetes. Let's talk about, before we went to break, we were talking about obesity and how that's become, the obesity rate has increased.
Which is one of the huge factors for the type 2 diabetes.
Right. So why is it such a factor?
Well, as you start to get overweight, what we're talking about is the ability of the body to use insulin. And as you put on weight, there is a tremendous amount of changes that occur. Your pH changes, in your endocrine system starts to change, how hard the body has to work, the cellular resistance changes. So obesity just changes the whole physiology of how the system works, so that the body is not as able to transport the glucose into the cells as it should. The body is a very fine-tuned type of organism, and there needs to be a balance. What we do is we talk about balance in the system, homeostasis, and homeostasis is the definition of health. And there is a perfect amount of fat percentage that we should have. For a woman, she shouldn't be over 30% on her fat percentage. If she is, it leads to a greater increased chance of diabetes, a greater chance of cardiovascular disease, and a greater chance of cancer, which are right now the biggest killers.
3 biggest killers.
Right. So, obesity is one of the great plagues that we're experiencing right now. If a woman goes over 45% fat percentage, then we're talking about morbid obesity. Your chances of living for a long life are very slim, and your health risk increase quite dramatically in all those different types of areas. So measuring and knowing what your body fat percentage is, and you shouldn't depend on BMI, because that can throw it off.
That's body mass index, right?
Right. What you should do, what we do, is we do a body composition analysis, which shows the fat percentage, and we watch that as we are doing any type of weight loss or monitoring someone. So one of the things that I always tell people, that if your chances of having type 2 diabetes become very slim, if you can get below the obesity measure. It really usually goes away. So for a woman, it's 30%. For a man, it's 25%. So you need to maintain that fat percentage below 25%. And for a male, it's morbid obesity is 40% or greater. So having that measure, everybody should know that. That's one thing that we do on everyone.
It's not always fun to do or find out.
Because people can be surprised.
Right.
There is such a thing as skinny fat. Where, I've had women who came in who had 35% body fat, and they wear a size 2.
Skinny.
Right, but they have no muscle.
And you always say that's like brown fat. That's actually more dangerous.
Right, the brown fat's around the abdomen. So also your waist circumference also has a big effect on that. So looking at that and making sure that your waist circumference is at a good, because that's the brown fat that causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, and just the inflammation in the body.
Correct.
Right.
It does cause quite a bit of inflammation with that fat percentage. So
it doesn't take long for my body. If I'm eating poorly, even one or 2 days.
Right.
I'm feeling it in my joints and pretty quickly.
One of the things that we say for eating is when you go to the grocery store, go on the outside.
Yeah.
Because that's where all the fresh produce is.
Outside perimeter, yeah.
Right. Not going into the center of the aisles where you have all the packaged foods, because that's where you have your issues.
Right.
And then, of course, fast food is just loaded. People who eat fast food on a regular basis, it's very hard to keep your weight under control, because you have to use a lot of chemicals to be able to preserve that food, to make it tasty. And when you do that, the body doesn't know what to do with those chemicals.
They're like, I'm looking for a fat cell. Get all comfy and cozy in there.
Right.
Because once it's in there, can't get it out.
Right.
And we're going to talk about the treatment at the Prather practice for obesity in our next segment. Let's just talk about the role of exercise in type 2 diabetes. What role does exercise play?
Exercise is one of the more critical parts for type 2 diabetes. If you exercise, it increases your body's ability to transport the glucose and also get it into the cell. The body really, it kicks in the whole aerobic aspect, the whole oxygenation.
Yeah.
So it gets the Krebs cycles going so that you start to utilize things better. Matter of fact, one of the things is I say that exercise takes care of a world of sins, and exercise does. So exercise needs to be a regular part of someone's health. What we recommend is that you do 5 days a week of about 45 minutes of aerobic exercise, and about 3 days a week of anaerobic, where you're doing some resistance types exercise. And that goes a tremendous distance in getting your body to work better. And so if you can implement those things, it will really help out. And even just starting out on a small basis.
Yeah, just get moving.
Get moving. And walk for 45 minutes 5 days a week does wonders.
But even, that can be hard for some people, that time.
It is.
But even 3 days a week doing aerobic can be good.
Yeah, you get every little bit that you do really has a very excellent effect.
Yeah.
And it really just kind of gets the whole machine working. We were not made just to sit around. We were made to move and to exercise and to keep on moving.
That's why we're given legs.
And that's why yes.
And feet at the end of them.
Yes.
Good. I know there's something called Couch to 5K. And
Yes.
It's a great way to just start. And
well, you don't have to do a 5K.
Right. Right. But it just progresses you, and you can walk. You don't even have to run.
Right.
Yeah. So what diet is best for diabetes?
Well, what we recommend is the glycemic diet. So glycemic diet is the low sugar, also eating, all non-processed foods. So checking to see what the glycemic index on all foods. So what we do is we print out that. It really helps people to know how to keep their blood sugar down, eat more complex carbohydrates instead of simple carbohydrates, high fiber diet, all makes a very big difference. So the glycemic diet is really where you should be going along those lines, but it is something that if you follow, you will be able to get over your type 2 diabetes.
So you won't need to take the insulin
And that's important. Insulin is, of course, absolutely necessary for type 1 diabetics, but you want to keep the numbers as low as possible. The less insulin that you have to take, the better for your overall health and longevity. But also for type 2 diabetes, if you fail at monitoring and keeping track of your type 2 diabetes, yes, you have to be on insulin if you're not going to do what you need to do. But if you do what you need to do and make sure that you follow a good diet, exercise, take the proper supplementation, do the different things, then you shouldn't have to take insulin.
Well, and I've seen type 2 diabetics like, well, I'm going to have that piece of cake and just
pop some
boost my
pop some insulin in there. Yeah, right. And that's kind of definitely not something that you should do.
Right. Okay. When we come back, more on diabetes, a growing crisis. Listen to the Voice of Health Radio on your smartphone or tablet on all of the top radio apps available. TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio. You can find these apps and more on our website at thevoiceofhealthradio.com. This is The Voice of Health with Dr. Robert Prather. Laughter is the best medicine.
Richard Simmons, see, there's one of the reasons why health food never caught on, man. They had the lamest spokespeople. They had John Denver for grape nuts, Wilford Brimley, the Jolly Green Giant. These aren't exactly the manliest of men here. The worst is the Quaker Oats man. Now, oatmeal's supposed to be one of the best things you can get your kids to eat, but their mascot's somebody you wouldn't let your kids talk to. It's an old dude wearing a powdered wig and man stockings. If you saw him on the playground trying to talk to your kids, you'd be calling up Chris Hansen from Dateline. He'd be like, "What's that in the bag?" "It's oatmeal." Like, "Get out of here, creep." "I was going to make breakfast." Bet you were, sicko.
A special message from the DTS Weight Loss Center at the Prather practice.
Are you tired of making the same weight loss resolution only to end up right back where you started? Let the professionals at DTS Weight Loss Center take all the frustration out of dieting. Our nutritionists and wellness coaches know what works for every body type and can develop a plan specific to your needs throughout your medically supervised program. Make the change by visiting us online at dtsweightlosscenter.com. Dedicate, transform, succeed.
When you call the Prather practice to schedule your appointment at our DTS Weight Loss Center, mention the Voice of Health radio show and you'll receive a free initial consultation plus a free body composition analysis. 317-848-8048. That's 317-848-8048. The DTS Weight Loss Center at the Prather practice. Dedicate, transform, succeed.
Doctor, give me the news. I got a bad case of loving you. No pill's gonna kill my head.
I'm Lisa Prather, and you're listening to The Voice of Health with Dr. Robert Prather of the Prather Practice, where we get to the root cause of your health issue. We're talking today about diabetes, a growing crisis. And Dr. Prather, let's talk about why is early detection so important with type 2 diabetes?
And we want to pick that up even in a pre-diabetic situation. The farther that the type 2 diabetes, you can have type 2 diabetes for so long that you're not going to be able to get out of it. So I can't emphasize enough to be checked for diabetes and pre-diabetic on a yearly basis.
Is that through blood work?
That's through blood work. You can tell that. And especially if we can start to see that in a pre-diabetic, even the early signs, we start to see different types of blood tests, and that this is something that you need to go after. Once you become diabetic, it's much harder to lose weight. A very interesting aspect of as we put on fat and things start to slow down. The work that it takes for someone at 40% to lose weight as opposed to someone at 30% is much harder.
Talking about body fat, yeah.
Body fat percentage.
Right, you're carrying around 10% more body fat.
Well, it's not even that. When you eat, a normal response is that your metabolism increases by about 40%. So you start to burn off the calories. For someone who is at 40%, there's about a 10% increase. So the more that you are out of balance, the more work it takes to get back into balance. It's much harder for someone. But you can do it. But you can do it. It's much harder for someone at 40% body fat and type 2 diabetic than someone who's pre-diabetic and at 30%. So the effort on that, the sooner you can find it, the less effort it takes to make the correction. And
I know we have different weight loss programs at the Prather practice, and people have gone off their insulin as they're losing that body fat percentage. It's so exciting.
We've had people, I think of one gentleman who had 45% body fat.
That's almost half your body.
Yeah.
Wow.
45%, got him down to 24% body fat percentage, and he was no longer type 2 diabetic. Just he could play with his kids now. It was just such a change in his life. Everything just turned around. He was having trouble keeping a job. His marriage came back into life. It was quite remarkable to see that progress. So achieving that.
But he had to decide. And I think what did it for him is not being able to play with his child and keep up with his 3-year-old.
Yeah, the 3-year-old. He was chasing after the 3-year-old, and the 3-year-old.
I don't think he was able to chase.
Yeah, he wasn't able to chase the 3-year-old.
Right. And that was what motivated him.
Correct.
To lose the weight. And he made that decision and did it. And we were able to help him, which was so exciting. Right.
So, we can see that type 2 diabetes, again, go away. You just need to make that decision and go for it.
Yeah, it can be reversed. So what role does the endocrine system play in diabetes?
Well, the pancreas, which controls the insulin, is an endocrine organ. As we're talking to people, we had, I think of one woman who came in who was struggling with type 2 diabetes, but her thyroid wasn't working correctly. And getting the thyroid working, she also had a lowered pituitary function. All those different types of things add up. Matter of fact, one of the things, like the gentleman who had the 45% body fat percentage, he was very low on his testosterone. He had an estrogen dominance, which occurs quite a bit, both in men and women. And if you become estrogen, if there's not a balance on that and you become estrogen dominant, you, put on more weight, but then also it leads to type 2 diabetes because it increases the insulin resistance of the cells. So having having the balance in the endocrine system and the hormones is essential to be able to treat type 2 diabetes. Otherwise, it's going to be a very frustrating thing, and we don't like frustrations.
No, we don't. But we like balance, and we talk about that. If you've been a radio listener for a while, we talk about homeostasis.
Sure.
And that really depicts when the body's in balance, or homeostasis, then you're healthy.
Right. It's one of the things that we always do is whenever we do any type of weight loss, we always check the hormones. Mm-hmm. So it's a medical weight loss that we do in our office. We don't just. I had one lady who was almost at 40%, and she said, "Well, I just don't want to." I've tried 4 different diets and even medical, where I've gone to different people to get some diets. She said I even tried the HCG. Mm-hmm. And I sat there and I said, well, let's take a look at your blood work, because your endocrine system is off. And if your endocrine system is off, you're not going to lose weight. Mm-hmm. You have to have that balanced out. So we did that.
Balanced your endocrine system.
Balanced the endocrine system, and without even doing any changes, she had lost about 10 pounds. Just by balancing out the endocrine system. And she says, oh my gosh, let's do
this thing.
Let's do this thing. So it made it really easy at that point. So there are reasons that things are occurring, and most people who go on diets actually increase their weight. Mm-hmm. So, you have to do it correctly. You have to have someone who knows how to balance and bring the body back into homeostasis. When you do, things get much easier.
Right, and that makes total sense.
Sure.
Getting everything balanced. And so how is the endocrine system evaluated?
Blood work.
Okay.
Blood work is really the
And we do
best way to do
extensive
that.
blood work at the
Right.
Prather practice.
There are other ways to do it, which we can do if necessary, but most of it is determined through blood tests.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the services that we provide at the Prather practice that help with type 2 diabetes. Chiropractic, how is that helpful with diabetes?
The nervous system is what the chiropractic helps out with, and the nervous system is that and the endocrine system are the 2 master controls. Matter of fact, the endocrine system and the nervous system really almost work as one. And you can get some excellent changes in the neurological system and in the endocrine system by doing chiropractic adjustments. So the controlling mechanisms need to be in place to really get the best results.
So you're not just bone setters.
No.
You're working the nervous system.
Yeah, it's really a neurological, and people can tell immediately a lot of the neurological changes that take place. And many people have tried functional medicine, but if they haven't also been able to utilize the structural portion as well as the functional, then you don't get the full benefit. One of the things that was done was a large experiment with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois up in Chicago, and they had done a combination of structure function, saw excellent results, but some of the doctors came in and said, well, I'll just do functional medicine and you should be able to see the same results, and they didn't.
They didn't without the structural.
Without the structural, you don't get the amazing changes. You have to combine the structure and function. That's why we have them both in our office. So we are working with the physiology and the structural portion of the system, and that's where we really get the great changes.
And that's why, on the structural side, we have chiropractic.
Correct.
Let's talk about, on the structural side, we have acupuncture. What role does acupuncture play in the treatment of diabetes?
Well, there are set points that are known to help with diabetes. There have been some of the cases that we've had hadn't really started out with the acupuncture, but they were really resistant. In other words, we weren't getting the results we were wanting to get. So we did an evaluation of their meridians, found specifically what acupuncture points to hit those, and then we started to see some real changes.
And when you talk about meridians, that's what acupuncture is based on, the meridians in our body, correct?
Right. The electromagnetic energy of the body is one of the critical things.
And I like what we do. We're able to check those meridians out in the body.
There is a way to diagnose that. see exactly how they're off, and then find specifically what points are going to be able to help to balance out the system. But if you're looking for a complete system of healing, you have to include the electromagnetic, the acupuncture, and one of the things there, I had one young lady who got acupuncture today, and was I did the needles on her, and she said afterwards, she said, I was so scared, but then she said, I hardly even noticed that when you put them in. So she says it was kind of a build up, and then she says I was a little disappointed.
A little letdown.
Yeah, there was a little bit of a letdown, because it was like, that was it. That's all I was expecting. But
Did you say, well, I could take them out and start over again?
So the acupuncture isn't really that bad, but also we use laser. We have powder, we have electrical. So for those people who absolutely can't do needles, there are alternatives. We are working, needle isn't the only way that you can approach that.
Right. So if you're out there and you're scared of needles, there's other ways.
Yeah, and really the acupuncture needles are more filaments than they are needles. They're as thin as a hair. So and they're not sharp on the end. They're rounded. So they go in between the skin cells, and there's no bleeding.
I love getting acupuncture.
Yeah, it really is very relaxing.
When we come back, more on diabetes, a growing crisis. Never miss an episode of The Voice of Health so that you can stay informed and empowered about your health. Get a podcast of our show automatically delivered to you every week by signing up for our show on iTunes. You can find that link on our website at thevoiceofhealthradio.com. And don't forget, thevoiceofhealthradio.com has complete archives of all of our past episodes with an audio library of information to help you add more life to your years and more years to your life. This is The Voice of Health with Dr. Robert Prather. The Voice of Health Wellness Tip with Dr. Robert Prather of the Prather Practice. The 3 tests, Dr. Prather, that you suggest everyone have every year, to give a complete picture of health is the Prather Profile Blood Analysis, the GI Effect Stool Kit, and the hair analysis. And what does the hair analysis reveal about a person's health?
Well, one of the most important things that we're looking on a hair analysis is the possibility of heavy metal toxicity. That can cause a huge variety of diseases and symptoms that can actually occur. Any type of autoimmune disease could begin with a heavy metal toxicity, or any type of neurological conditions, MS, ALS. A lot of those types of diseases can be kicked off by heavy metal toxicity, including a whole host of symptoms that would be hard to explain any other way. The other things that show up with the hair analysis is the balance of the minerals. It can play a huge effect on the entire system. When plants actually grow, they can actually make the fatty acids, the vitamins, the amino acids, but the minerals have to come from the ground. So if the minerals aren't there, they can't make them. So the most common deficiencies that can occur in nutritional health of an individual is mineral deficiencies or mineral imbalances. And the hair analysis is the best way to actually show up those changes that can occur.
Well, how does the hair analysis help find the root cause of health issues? And no pun intended there.
When you're actually trying to discover what's going on in an individual, so many things can actually result with a mineral imbalance or a heavy metal toxicity that it really behooves us to actually do that particular test. And that's one reason that I recommend it be done at least once a year. And if there's any type of important type of disease process going on or unexplained symptoms, checking on the hair analysis really can show a tremendous amount and reveal the underlying problem.
Schedule your appointment at the Prather Practice, 317-848-8048. That's 317-848-8048. Or learn more on our website at thevoiceofhealthradio.com. The Prather Practice, restoring hope. We want to invite our radio listeners to join us for a very special screening of an award-winning film called Just One Drop. This special movie event will be held on Wednesday, November 7th at 7:30 p.m. at the Regal Village Park Cinema in Carmel. Homeopathy is a specific form of medicine that uses minute doses of highly diluted substance that stimulates the body to cure itself. To many, homeopathy seems implausible. They fear it is a placebo effect, or worse, a form of deception or quackery. Yet, homeopathy has been around for over 200 years and is used by millions worldwide. The film Just One Drop explores the controversy, dispels the misconceptions and the myths, and asks whether or not homeopathy has been given a fair shake. The Just One Drop special movie event, Wednesday, November 7th at 7:30 p.m. at the Regal Village Park Cinema in Carmel. Learn more about the film and buy your tickets now at thevoiceofhealthradio.com.
It's a beautiful day. Sky falls, you feel like it's a beautiful day. So let it get away.
You're listening to The Voice of Health with Dr. Robert Prather of the Prather Practice, where our mission is restoring hope to our patients. We're talking today about diabetes, a growing crisis, and this is part one of a two-part series. We just decided that. Going into the fourth segment, we just, have a lot of material to cover.
There's a lot of material.
This is a growing crisis, and pre-diabetic, 33% of the American population is pre-diabetic. So very important. Now, before we went to break, we were talking about the different treatments we provide at the Prather practice for type 2 diabetes that are helpful. Let's go into supplementation. Let's talk about herbs and how they help diabetes.
Yeah, herbs are an excellent way to treat diabetes. There's been quite a bit of research done on that, and I'm not going to cover all the different types of areas. But
and don't ask us to spell them either.
One of my favorite things is bitter melon. Now, bitter melon is something that you can actually go to the grocery store and get.
And get a bitter melon?
Get a bitter melon. Bitter melon is quite amazing, not only for type 2 diabetes, but also for type 1.
Oh, okay.
So there's been excellent results on that. So yeah, just going to the grocery store and adding bitter melon to your diet, even on a daily basis, eat a bitter melon. Mm-hmm. You can see some rather dramatic changes.
And it's called bitter melon?
It's called bitter melon.
Oh, okay.
So, that's not something that you necessarily need to go to to get from a pill. Mm-hmm. That's something that you can actually eat. And so...
does it come in herbal form?
I haven't seen that in herbal form. So I recommend that people go and buy bitter melon, mm-hmm. and then eat it. Another thing that just on a food basis, and these of course are kind of considered herbals, mm-hmm. because of the food basis, is prickle pear cactus.
Uh-huh.
That's out of Mexico, and that you can get that in a supplement form, but you can also buy it and eat it. Mm-hmm. And prickle pear cactus has been used in Mexico for an awful long time, even back into the Aztec days, to keep type 2 diabetes under control. Also, again, helps out with type 1 diabetes. And the interesting thing about that is that people of Native American, mm-hmm. North American, Indian, both Mexico and American, much higher type 2 diabetic rate than the average person. One of the things that you have is something called Syndrome X, which is a genetic tendency that you put on weight easier, and you lose weight easier, and you become type 2 diabetic much easier than the average person.
And it's called what?
Syndrome X.
Syndrome X. Okay.
Because there's a genetic change, mm-hmm. and what it does is it was an adaptation during famine. So people who have Syndrome X can survive a famine longer than the average person. Mm-hmm. but they do put on weight, lose weight slower, and develop type 2 diabetes. And it's a much higher, in other words, that's a genetic factor, and it's much more common in Native American, North American population, South American population, and it's also found in other different...
I was wondering, Eskimos are...
Yeah, Eskimos are very high along those lines. People of the plains of Russia, Ukrainians, Kazakhs, also have a higher incidence along those lines. So there is a very strong genetic type of tendency along those lines. People of Mediterranean descent probably have the lowest amount of syndrome X.
That would be me.
Yeah, there you go.
No famine for this Italian.
So now, one of my favorite one is fenugreek. It's also called Greek hay. To keep my personal sugar insulin levels under control. That's what I take. No, I'm not.
That's an herbal.
That's an herbal. I'm not even pre-diabetic. I show up absolutely perfect on my blood glucose and triglycerides and all those types of things. But
show off.
But I know that the fenugreek is something that's very good for me. It helps to utilize my insulin better. So that's something that's very, very beneficial. Inulin. You can buy inulin capsules. Now, where you get inulin from is from burdock root, dandelion root. Having your dandelion roots is a good thing.
We used to eat those. My grandparents made those.
And Jerusalem artichokes. So those are good sources of inulin, and inulin can do excellent results with diabetes. Gymnema sylvestre, that is something that we carry in our office too, and that works on both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So very good thing to have checked out, see what's going on. Garlic and onion also are excellent for keeping type 2 diabetes under control. Also Coxsackievirus indica, it's an Ayurvedic herb. I have used that on quite a few people with some very excellent results. So that's another area that you can look at. Aloe vera is something that has been shown to be excellent for type 2 diabetes. Bilberry is very good for damage to the eyes. One of the things that occurs is that different organ systems of the body start to break down, and your vision starts to go if you have type 2 diabetes. Also, ginkgo biloba helps with the circulation. One of the major occurrences with insulin, if you get too high of insulin in the system, where things are off, and the body's not quite working right, then it starts to cause damage along the artery walls. So the endothelial lining of the arteries starts to become damaged. The body then will lay down plaque to protect it, and then you can start to get some fatty buildup, and then you can get arteriosclerosis and atherosclerosis, and those things can be helped with that.
Now, what's nice, at the Prather practice, there's no guesswork. We can see specifically what herbal will help. And it doesn't mean that whole list, first, that you have to take all those. There's specific ones that are better for one person than another.
Correct.
Might have two people with the type 2 diabetes diagnosis, but doesn't mean the treatment's going to be the same.
Exactly. One of the things that we have is called electrodermal screening. And what it does is it measures the galvanic skin resistance on the body, same thing that you do for a lie detector or biofeedback. So we can see the body's response if it's positive or negative, which improves our results. Of course, we do pre and post blood tests to make sure that it's working.
Right.
But how do you get there with so many choices? Matter of fact, if you're looking at herbals, those are just a small number of some of the herbs that can be helpful for type 2 diabetes. I mean, we could go on for quite a good hour just talking about the herbals that are involved with that.
Well, we're going to stop now because we are going to continue next week with part 2. Thank you, Dr. Prather.
Thank you, Lisa.
So, Diabetes, a Growing Crisis, part 1 of a 2-part series. The Prather practice is located at 8902 North Meridian Street on the north side of Indianapolis, just south of the I-465 loop. If we can help you to achieve better health, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with our office at 317-848-8048. That's 317-848-8048. Join us again here next week or anytime on our website at thevoiceofhealthradio.com for The Voice of Health with Dr. Robert Prather.